this is kind of like a news dump story, I guess, is the best way to put it. I spoke to some people at Leipzig over the weekend and on Monday about just gauging the temperature on what's going on. And there's lots going on and lots not going on at the same time. The big news, of course, out of the UK was that Arsenal are now in advanced talks to sign Victor Gyökeres, right? And that has direct implications for Benjamin Sesko. I've been told that if Arsenal sign Gyökeres, the Sesko deal is pretty much dead. And he's already said goodbye to his teammates. Leipzig were in Brazil, did a Brazil tour this spring where they played Santos and and Red Bull Bragantino, the sister club in Brazil. And Sesko already said goodbye to his teammates, and now there's a real possibility that he could stay because, we've talked about this or alluded to this a little bit. The market for center forwards is really odd over the last 2 or 3 transfer windows. Big story now with Victor Osimhen that he could stay in Turkey. John Duran signed in Turkey as well, right? But there's all these. The market for these big center forwards isn't as robust as we thought. Maybe like a year or so, 2 years ago when Bayern Munich signed Harry Kane for 95 million euros. Maybe it's just also like, for a while we went for big center forwards and we every club wanted one, and then they realized, well, actually, that is not as useful as a position as we thought because PSG rushed and win the Champions League with Ousmane Dembele as the number 9, right? They actually discard the number 9 Koulibaly to Juventus. Gonzalo Ramos also not playing a big role there. It seems like we've almost gone back to a front 3 without a true real number 9, but players that can press. And I feel like maybe that has influenced the market a little bit. And so is there another team other than Arsenal, who seems like one of the very few teams in for number 9s that would spend 70 million euros for Benjamin Sesko, which is the handshake. There's no exit clause, but there's a handshake agreement between RB Leipzig and Sesko that if someone comes in with 70 million euros, you're allowed to go. And that, I think, is maybe the oddity of this window. Now, I've been told that if there is no one coming in for 70 million euros, Sesko would be happy to stay at Leipzig. There would be no problem with reintegrating him in the squad, keeping him there. And if he plays well, then he has maybe another opportunity to go next year. But it's just kind of like a really odd situation at the moment for him and the club.
Yeah, this is a really interesting kind of subplot that's been kind of unfolding, I think, for a couple of years now. I think top clubs in Europe are beginning to kind of realize that centre forwards perhaps aren't as important to the modern game as they used to do. I've been kind of banging this drum for a while now. I keep saying, I've been saying all season, Harry Kane isn't, a player that can decide a game on his own. I've been saying the same about Erling Haaland at Manchester City. Could maybe even make an argument for Kylian Mbappe when he was at PSG. I wrote a whole newsletter not long ago about weak link theory and strong link theory and things like that, and how the sport is coming out of this period where we watched Ronaldo and Lionel Messi win games almost single-handedly for like 10 years, and that's because they're like 2 of the best players who've ever played the sport. And I think a lot of people thought, well, these guys that come next aren't exactly Messi or Ronaldo, but they play similar positions, they score as many goals, follows to reason that they'll also be just as important. And I think if you look at a lot of the big number 9s that have moved club in recent years, I've got the list of the most expensive centre forwards in front of me with a very useful website called Transfermarkt. And in the last kind of 3 or 4 years, Harry Kane, 95 million euros, Lukaku, 113 million euros, Darwin Núñez, 85 million euros, Vlahovic, 84 million euros to Juventus, Kai Havertz to Chelsea as well, though I'd argue he wasn't centre forward when he moved there. Rasmus Højlund, Man United, 78 million euros. Just about every single one of those strikers has, well, many of them done perfectly well, and Harry Kane, for example, has done perfectly well at Bayern Munich, but that's the kind of money you're talking about that should be spent on guys who are going to win titles, win trophies, really transform the teams they're joining. And I wouldn't really see any of those players have transformed the teams that they're joining for that kind of money. And I think as a result, I think a lot of clubs are looking around this summer at the number 9s that are available for sale, or maybe not for sale, but potentially not for sale. The asking prices that are associated with them, and a lot of them are saying, look, I'm not really prepared to go out and spend 95 million euros on a centre forward anymore, because we did that a couple of years ago. It didn't work out. And I think a lot of clubs are maybe getting a little smarter to that. So I think as a result, that's kind of deflated the whole market for centre forwards. And I think that's kind of where Benjamin Sesko's been caught out, and why Arsenal have actually gone for Gyökeres in the end. I mean, it looks as though Gyökeres is going to cost a lot less money than Sesko would have done, not only in terms of a transfer fee, which is probably going to work out about 2/3 of what Leipzig were asking for. And of course, Sesko's wage demands were a lot higher as well. Now, that's because Gyökeres is coming from the Portuguese league in Leipzig, and Sesko's coming from RB Leipzig. So there's no one's really at fault there. Leipzig are within the right to ask for what they want. Sesko's within his right to ask for what he wants. But I guess Arsenal, like a lot of clubs around Europe right now, just don't think a big centre forward is worth that kind of money. They're not worth spending the best part of 100 million euros on right now. And I can kind of see why, to be perfectly honest with you. I have kind of watched this kind of transfer saga play out this summer, and I've been kind of watching behind, like, with almost like a wince on my face or something like that. I've been kind of worried because I'm not entirely sure Sesko was worth that kind of money, because I don't think he's the finished product. I don't think he's proven himself at Bundesliga level as a kind of well-rounded, maybe not world-class, but, Bundesliga level player. He's just not, in my opinion, shown enough times that he's willing to grab a game by the scruff of the neck and win it for Leipzig. He just doesn't do that to him enough times. I just don't think he's shown that by any means. I think he's still got a lot to learn in his game. He's still got to basically, I guess what I'm trying to say here, he hasn't mastered Leipzig. He hasn't mastered the Bundesliga. So for a club to come in and spend 100 million euros on him, I think would have put a lot of pressure on him. It would have put a lot of pressure on like a club like Arsenal to sign him, because he would have had to hit the ground running. And I just don't think he's ready for that. So I'm actually quite glad that he'll presumably now stay at Leipzig for another season, get another season to work on his game, hopefully become that player next summer, and then he can go and do whatever he wants. But at this moment in time, man, I can completely understand why Arsenal aren't paying that money for him, and I think it's probably best for all parties involved, except maybe the Leipzig accountant.
I think they'll be fine. I think, before we move on to the other Leipzig topic that we want to talk about, or the other two, I think the sport is very reactionary. All sports are. This is not just a football phenomenon. You can go to every sport in the world, and it's very reactionary. And I think what happened is in 2022, Real Madrid win the Champions League with Benzema, classic number 9. In 2023, Man City win the Champions League with Erling Haaland, classic number 9, right? So the entire world said, we all need a big number 9 up front, right? When in reality, there was much more at play here. So Bayern Munich go out and sign Harry Kane desperately, right? They abandoned their project without a true number 9 up front. And then, of course, everyone else kind of rushed to sign their Erling Haaland or Karim Benzema, when in reality, that wasn't necessary. And now, of course, PSG have won the Champions League without a true number 9. Luis Enrique discarding that formation. They beat Bayern Munich, of course, just now at the Club World Cup, which a phenomenal game, again, playing without a true number 9. And now just watch the entire world react to that step. This is just how it goes, right? So I don't actually, I think the sport isn't as creative as people think. There's few clubs who are creative and just go their own way no matter what. PSG did it, and of course you can ask and wonder about the finances behind it, and whether that's ethical or not. That's a completely different question. But Luis Enrique has found the perfect solutions, and now lots of people will try to create cheap copies of it without having success. And I think that is where this rush for number 9s has come from. I think Arsenal will probably in a better place with playing Kai Havertz there, who isn't a true number 9, was probably better in playing that kind of pressing system that has made PSG successful.